Hello there, Michelle Short here for My Favourite Things. Today I have a spring themed friendship tag to share with you using the Sunshine Friends set. So let's get started. This is the beautiful Sunshine Friends set designed by Stacey Yakula. It's absolutely adorable. I really love all of the images in the set, but I decided to keep my scene quite simple and just use the bear there holding the flower and then also these little bees. These have got smiley faces on them and I absolutely fell in love with them. They're just absolutely adorable. So I'm stamping them down onto some smooth white cardstock with extreme black ink. I'm using the Misty here so that I can stamp them multiple times so that I get a really nice dark impression on that outline. I'm then going to colour them with Copic markers. So I do a very simple Copic colouring. I do think that although I do try and get some darker areas and some lighter areas when I'm Copic colouring, I do think I'm a fairly simple Copic colourer. So I'm starting with these bees here, as you can see, and I started off by adding Y17 and then blended that out with Y15. And then I realised that it was a little bit too light. I wanted a bit more of shadow. So I used YR27, and then although it does look like it's quite orangey, I go back in with that Y17 and that does blend it out quite a lot, and it just makes it just that little bit darker, and so I get a bit more of a shadow in. And then I went in with Y11 for the lightest area. And then for the black bit on the top of his or her head, I then went in with the C10 and then the C7 and then the C5. And then for the wings, I'm using B00 and then B quadruple 0. I want the wings to kind of look transparent, but since I'm going to have a blue background, I wanted to add a little bit of blue to them. So then for the bear, I'm using E49. That's my darkest shade, and I'm just kind of mapping in all of the darker areas. So underneath his arm, underneath his neck, and then that side. I'm kind of thinking that my light source is towards the right hand side. So all of my darkest areas are on the left hand side. I'm then going to go in with E79 and blend that out. I don't use this kind of colour family that often with the earth shades, although I do really love it. It's kind of like a muted brown, but I do still think it has a bit of kind of like an earthiness to it, if that makes sense. I really do love it. I just don't end up using them that often. So I blended that out with the E77, and then here I'm going in with the E74, and I'm using that colour quite a bit to kind of move the shades over towards the right hand side. And then I'm going in with E71 and blending that out further, and then I can finish off with E70 right on that right side as my lightest shade, and just blending those out. And I think all of these shades do blend really nicely together. And then for his kind of nose and mouth area, I go in with E74, E71 and then E70, and then I did think it was a little bit light, so I do go back in with the E77 just to kind of darken that up a little bit more towards the left hand side, and I just then kind of go back in with the other shades just to blend that out. And then I do use E70 on the inside of the ears, and I could have left it as is, but I do like to add a little bit of pink inside of Critter's ears, so I'm using R30 first and then R83 on top for my darker colour. And then for the inside of the flower, I'm using Y17, and then again I do go back in with that YR27. And then blend that out with the Y15 and then finish off with the Y11 like I did with the bees. And then when colouring kind of flowers, especially that you want to kind of look like they're white, I did want this to kind of look a bit like a daisy. it's always difficult to figure out which colour you want to use to do the shading. You can leave it just completely white, but if the rest of the images are coloured, you kind of feel like you want to add a bit of shading onto that image. So you could go in with greys, which is what I do quite a lot, but sometimes I just like to add an extra kind of pop of colour. So I'm using the BG markers here. I went in originally with the BG11 and my marker is quite dry, so I didn't get a huge amount of saturation of colour. So I went back in with the BG13 and now I'm blending it out with the BG10. It's not like a really smooth blend. When I first started colouring with Copic markers, I found that I always really wanted to get a really nice smooth blend, but as time has gone on, I found that actually I quite like having not harsh areas but just a little bit less blending. I actually quite like that look, so I really like how that flower turned out in the end, and it kind of still looks white but with that added kind of pop of colour with those aquas. So for the greens here, for the leaf and the stem, I'm using G29, YG17, YG23 and then finishing off with YG01. And then I did colour the stem off camera just because it's so tiny, I didn't want my head to get in the way. I'm then taking the Sunshine Friends Dynamics. I did them down with some low tack tape and run those through my die cutting machine, and that's going to cut out those images with a nice white border around them. And then I'm just going to take a pokey tool here and just pop out those two little gaps there underneath where the flower is. So now I've got my images coloured and cut out. I'm then going to work on the tag itself. So this is the Trendy Tags Dynamics, and I'm actually just using the tag shape, but it does come with kind of like a scalloped border as well, which I think is really nice, but I am just using it as the tag shape. So I'm just working out here where I want to have my sky and my grass kind of meet in the middle. So I'm taking some post-it tape and I'm just using the grid lines on my mat here to try and get that as straight as possible, but using that bear there so that I can make sure that he's going to fit inside of that tag. I'm then just covering up the top part of that tag because knowing me, I'm going to get ink there when I don't want it. So I'm going to work first on the grass section. So I'm taking some distress inks and I'm using Twisted Citron to start with and an ink blending brush, and then off screen here I've got some scrap paper to my right and I just kind of dab the excess ink off of that brush. I like to work really light to start with and then build up the colour. I find that I get a better blend that way, and I don't want a huge amount of ink on this tag. I want to still have kind of like a bit of a white border on it. So once I've added the Twisted Citron, I do go in with the Mowed Lawn and just add a very small amount of that just towards that top of that grass section. I then can remove that tape and then I'm going to add it back on and cover over that grass area. And then I'm just going to take that larger memo tape and that's just going to hold the tag down so that I don't have to hold it too much and it's going to kind of stay in place. I'm then taking Mermaid Lagoon Distress ink. This is kind of like my favourite colour for sky. Although I kind of feel like sometimes it's a little bit too dark, I like it because it just gives a little bit of extra vibrancy to sky, I think. Again, I do go in very, very light to start with and kind of build up the colour. I want it to be a little bit darker towards the bottom and then kind of fade out to white at the top and the sides. And so now I've got my sky and my grass here. At this point, I wasn't 100% sure whether I was going to keep it as a tag or add it onto a card. So I've got my two little bees here and I'm thinking that one is going to go kind of at the top right and then one sort of further down at the bottom on the left, and that was my idea. And then I was going to keep it like that and then just add a sentiment on top and then pop it on a card base. And then as time went on here, I was thinking actually it would look really nice just to have the sentiment kind of like on the back of the tag and kind of make like another little kind of scene. So I've cut another tag from the Trendy Tag Dynamics, just from some white cardstock again, and I'm using the sentiment there from the Sunshine Friends set that says I'm glad we're friends, and I'm just stamping that down onto the tag using extreme black ink. Again, I'm just going to stamp it a couple of times so that I get a really nice dark impression. So at this point again, I was just thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to have it kind of plain white at the back. And then I thought, actually, maybe I might add one of those bees on it. And then I thought it might look quite nice to have kind of like the sky sort of extend onto the back of the tag, so kind of like it was sort of above where the image is on the front, if that makes sense. So I'm just adding a little bit of the Mermaid Lagoon Distress ink onto the back there, and thankfully it didn't kind of smudge that sentiment or anything like that. Ordinarily I would probably have done the ink blending first and then did the sentiment on top, but it worked out okay. So I'm going to grab that bee there. I've added some on point precision glue onto the back of him, and then I'm kind of thought, do I want it at the bottom or want it at the top? This is kind of like my process that you're seeing on screen. Quite often I do edit it out of videos, but I do think it's quite helpful sometimes just to see people's sort of thought process as the card or the tag in this instant kind of comes together. So I'm going to stick the two tags back to back. I added some tape runner onto the back of this one here, just adding some more on point precision glue because that's going to give me that kind of wiggle time. I don't really want to get my fingers in the distress ink because I don't want to get fingerprints in it. So I'm just trying to be really careful here, sort of lining them up and then kind of just pressing on the sides there where it hasn't got any of that ink. And then like I said, I've got that kind of time to sort of wiggle them together because I use that liquid glue. I'm then taking a piece of scrap paper and I'm just going to really adhere the two tags together. I've then added some foam tape onto the back of the bee and the bear. And then before I stick anything down, I really want to make sure where everything is going to be. In the original kind of plan, I obviously had the two bees. So now that bear is going to kind of shift more towards the right hand side so that they kind of, both of them are sort of in the middle of the tag. So again, I'm just kind of moving that bee around, seeing where it fits in best. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I can then remove the backs of that foam tape. And then using some tweezers, I'm just going to pop them down onto the tag. Trying to get that bear sort of as straight as possible. I just think he's absolutely adorable. I really love the expression on his face. And then, like I said, those bees with their smiling faces, they're just so, so cute. I'm then taking some black twine and just adding that through the top of the tag. And then I can tie that in a bow at the front. I do like to keep the bows fairly large and then also the tails of the bow quite long as well, so I can just cut those down and then fiddle with it a little while just to get it the shape that I want it. I'm then taking a white gel pen and I'm just adding some highlights onto the bear and then that leaf there as well. And then instead of adding some embellishments onto the tag, I decided to just go in with that white gel pen and just add some dots. I often kind of add splatter with some white gouache or something like that, but actually for this one I thought it'd be quite nice to just leave the ink blending as is and then just add some white dots on top. So I'm kind of going in sort of threes and making some of them a little bit bigger than some of the other ones, like I kind of would do with embellishments, and just kind of going mainly around where the images are. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the back of the tag and just add 3 of those dots just around that bee. And then to finish off, I'm going to add some crystal glaze into the middle of that flower. So I just add a small amount in the middle, and then using a pokey tool, I kind of just move it around so that I can get it exactly where I want it. And then I did add a tiny little bit on the end of the pokey tool, and I'm just adding that onto his nose there as well, just to add a little bit of sparkle and shine. And once that dries, that will dry completely clear. So I really like how the scene kind of starts at the front and then kind of extends onto the back. I don't know whether I would just send this as is or whether I may put it on a gift or something like that, but it's nice to have different options. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.